So, good afternoon, everybody, or good day. This is going to be a skeleton editing guide for Rome Total War. This is going to be mainly for the original version of the game. And I've written this at the request of the modders at Discord and Total War Center, mainly to record the basics of skeleton editing for future use, or at least as a historical resource, for lack of a better term. So we're just going to dive into it right away. And to begin with, we need to first understand what a skeleton is. And to do that, we are going to first need to begin with description model battle. This is the file that tells the game what sort of soldiers are used by the engine for the units and what sort of animations they have. So you'll notice in this example, we have a Sipahi. He's going to be using the 7 Years' War Killage skeleton. Apologies for misspelling Killage if you're Turkish. And then it's going to give you the texture to use. So that's going to be your 2D art, and then your 3D art, the model itself. The part we're interested in is the skeleton itself, and what that does is it tells the unit what sort of armature it is to use, and with it the associated animations. That way we know how it moves and how it interacts with the world, so to speak, to an extent. This becomes very important. It's much more important than people realize. But there's a small problem when you're modding skeletons. Normally, like everything else, just including description model battle, you would be able to modify it using your skeleton, alright, or using a text file, specifically description skeleton text, which does exist in the vanilla data folder, and and you can copy and paste it all you want in your own mod. The problem is, it doesn't work. Alright? And as a direct result, you can't simply edit text as you wish in this particular case. What the game does instead is it compiles everything into a series of packs and IDX folders, or data packages, for lack of a better description. I'm not a computer boffin. I just work the stuff. I don't have to understand it. So in this case, we have a pack and a skeleton IDX. These are respectively for animations and skeletons. But then you also have the pack files themselves, which contain the actual animations and skeletons. These are the two that you want. Right? And that's the way you're going to be able to get the game to actually read the skeleton that you want. Of course, that then raises the question. Everything is tied up in these pack and IDX files, so what do? Well, what you need to do is you need to go to a website, specifically this one right here, and download this zip file. This zip file has all sorts of modding tools in it. I'm going to show you what it looks like just so that nobody freaks out. It's going to be Merc 200331. You go inside, and the thing that you want is this, the IDX extractor. You can also find it in Google through under the name xidx. Once you have xidx, either way, what you do is you grab this folder, src. I don't know what it does, but I know it's required. Extract the animations, extract skeleton, pack skeleton, and pack animations. You need these 4 bat files, plus the xidx and the xidx shell. You copy that stuff, and you paste it here. Of course, I don't have to actually paste it because I already have the files right here. There's your xidx shell. The xidx itself should be running around somewhere. The important part is you put it inside your animation folder in data. Same goes if you want to extract music, by the way. If you want, you'll notice that there are music settings, extract sounds, and extract and the like. What you do is you just go to sounds and you extract the sounds from there. Right? You could edit one of the pack files to also pack your sounds if you want. I'm not going to do that or try it right now, and it's not even the point. So we're just going to, because we're focusing on the animations, or the skeletons more accurately. Okay. Once you do that, though, you're going to be presented with a series with the following. You're going to have 2 lists, animation list and list, which are going to be very important in a moment. The animation list is straightforward enough. that's going to tell the game what are the animations that need to go into the xdix file. All right, and as you can see, there are lots of animations. If the animation is not here, it doesn't matter what you put in your skeleton file in terms of animations, it's not going to read it, and as a result, it will crash the game. So you have to make sure your animations are added onto this. List is more directly relevant for what we're doing, and that is the one that actually tells the game what skeletons to pack. All right? If you have the animations for the skeleton here, but you don't have the skeleton itself, the game will run, but it will not be able to call on those animations. You need the skeleton. All right? And in this case, we're going to make the center of our focus today the 7 Years' War xdix, or xdix more accurately, which is the animation used for Sipahis, because I made that one the other day. All right. And then on top of these are straightforward enough to edit. You just edit it. Well, the real problem though is you want to be able to edit all these. These are the actual quote-unquote skeleton files. They're really records, for lack of a better term, originally parsed from description skeleton that the game reads in order to make use of the animations for each unit. All right. So these are the ones that we really want to edit. In the olden days, before Knight Errant and his converter, what you would do is you would simply copy and paste one of these. Let's say 7 Years Warhorse Backup here. We'll copy and paste it, and then we give it a new name. We'll say 7 Years War Slow Horse. And then you would add that to your animation or to your list, and that would be your new skeleton. Congratulations. Alright. This had a few problems, though, as one might imagine. It wasn't very precise. You couldn't really do all that much. So you need to be able to edit these files directly in order to really cook with fire, so to speak. And for that, you need a second program, which I will provide a link to in the description. And that is a means to convert these files, which you'll notice have no extensions, into perfectly editable text files, like this one. And this is where this particular version of the program comes in. It is a skeleton converter. It can convert from skeleton to text and text to skeleton. This particular version was modified by myself and Vartan a couple years ago in order to be able to edit certain things that were not possible up to that point, because the early version of this program did not have the means to work on collision distances, for example, or march speeds. This version can do so, and it also fixed an important error that we're going to go into as we delve into this topic. So I recommend you use this particular version because it will be the most complete and the best for Rome Total War Original. There is already an equivalent program for Rome Total War Remastered. I believe it's the IWTE specifically. It has the power to edit skeleton files the way this program will do. If anything, it's probably more powerful, but it only works for Remastered. It doesn't work for Original because the Feral made some changes to it. So anyway, the way you use this program is pretty simple. You just double click. It's going to give you an interface, skeleton to text, text to skeleton. Alright, so what you do is you take your skeleton, you select the skeleton you wish to modify. Alright, let's say I want to work on 7 Years War Slow Horse, or I want to work on the xdix. So what I do is I take it, and I just open it. Conversion complete. If you have a text file that has the same name as this newly converted file, it's going to overwrite it, so do keep that in mind. Doesn't work that way in the other direction, but we'll get to that. Either way, once you've done that, you're going to open up this text file and you're going to see what the skeleton file looks like. You finally get to see what it looks like under the hood. Right, and this is what it will typically look like. For the sake of neatness, though, we're going to go to this program right here. It's not where I actually edit it, but it's going to be a little easier to read. Alright. So anatomically, each skeleton file is going to look roughly like this. And you're going to have distinct skeleton file, whether it's an elephant a person, a camel, a horse, anything to your heart's desire, as long as it's not a siege engine, that's going to be the format of your skeleton. And the way it works is, it's best to think of this as a snake, or a worm or something. It comes with a head, it comes with a torso, or a body, and then it has a tail. Alright? That lets you break it down so, in a more organized fashion. You gobble it up into tiny little bits. And the first part is going to be the so-called head, which is going to be the information about the skeleton itself, the construction of the armature that your model is going to have. The body is going to have the part that everybody cares about in real terms, and that is the ability to modify the way the person moves, the way the person attacks, all that fun jazz. And then you have the tail, which arguably is the most important if you want to simulate formation warfare to a great degree of accuracy. So let's go back to the head. The head, like any head on any animal, without it, there's no point to the rest of it. All right? And it can be broken down into the following parts. Let's start with this area here. This is the unit scale, or more accurately, the skeleton scale. This is a number that's going to be multiplied into these coordinates down here. We're going to talk about them a little bit more in a moment. In order to produce the final size of the unit as per this skeleton. All right? There are additional ways you can tweak the size of the skeleton after that point. All right? So this is not the only way. In fact, there are multiple ways. This works in synergy, more or less, with two other files. The first file is going to be your animation list. And you'll notice that in many of the cases, after a semicolon, and it always has to be a semicolon, you have your animation entry, then your semicolon, the scale comes afterward. That's going to be multiplied into this number in order to change the size of the mount or to change the scale of the animation itself. Once you're done with... But then there's another way of adjusting the scale, and that is you take the unit, type Spahi, skeleton 7 years war killage, and then you add the scale here, 0.9. So what that tells the game is you multiply this, by whatever the scale of the animation was, which in this particular case is going to be 1. So 1 times 1 times 0.9. The end resulting model will be 0.9. It's worth noting that this particular method of changing scale, using the description model battle, is the least reliable. It tends to be the buggiest. You really don't want to go more than 0.85, or more accurately, you don't want to go less than 0.85 and no more than 1.2 or 1.15 in this case, because it does get buggy. For example, you're talking about situations where a horse's tail will look like it's been pinned on instead of having a proper tail. I've had that happen. Alright, so you really want to edit this and maybe the animation size, depending on the situation. Right. Don't want to take any chances, so always revert and then save. Next, this tells you the number of bones in the skeleton. Now here's a trick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Alright? There should be 20 entries there. And there are 20 of these. Okay? In reality, you have 19 bones, plus the scene root. But in this case, it actually counts the scene root itself. After that, you have, and in some cases it's one less. It depends on the style of model. After that, you have the skeleton itself. The first part doesn't really matter. You don't have to edit it. And in fact, I recommend you don't edit it. It mostly tells us whether the bones are transposable or not, which in most cases they are, so you don't have to change it. And if you see them all as zeros, again, don't change it. Just leave it as it is. This next entry right here then tells us the function of the bone. If you set the bone to 1, never mess with the scene root. If you set the bone to 1, that tells you that this is where a person will be mounted, on a horse or a camel. If you set it to 2, that's going to tell the person, or that's going to tell the game that this is for an elephant mount. 3 is also supposed to be an elephant mount as per description skeleton. In fact, it tells you so. Rider, idles, 1 to 3. However, a big problem with that is it doesn't get used. So I have no idea what exactly it's for. You then have 4 and 5. Now, due to the way that the programmers coded this particular skeleton entry, and in fact all skeleton entries, 4 is your left hand, 5 is your right hand. 5 specifically is very important if you're modifying phalanxes and phalanx animations, because that tells you where the pike, be it long or short, attaches to the soldier if you're using the phalanx formation, or at the very least if you have short spear. So you can change that to anything. So for example, I can have it so that the right hand is 0. There you go. And then I can have it attached to the man's pelvis. The pike will come out of the person's pelvis like that. You can save your prurient jokes for later. You then have whichever one is bone head, you can change it to accommodate the pike there. So I believe that should be bone head. You just change that to 5. Next thing you know, a pike is going to come straight out of the man's head. A funny sight to be sure, but it shows you just what you can do with this particular number. 4 then tells you which side the shield is. So supposedly, I'm not really sure how well that actually works. I've seen articles about this where playtesters will tell you that the game is bugged so that the shield side is acting like it's exposed and the exposed side is acting like the shield, but pike going through the certain files reveals that actually the difference isn't really all that dramatic. In fact, there may not even be any difference. So I don't know what's going on there. Don't ask me. I'm not a source code buff, and I just know how to do this. You then have 3 numbers that really don't have any particular function, so don't change them. And then you have the coordinates of the skeleton. That tells you the shape of the skeleton that's going to form the unit. Alright? And the way it works is, this is going to be your x coordinate. So if memory serves, this is going to be your right-left coordinate. Positive is to the right, negative is to the left. This will be your up-down coordinate. So that one's pretty common sense. Up is positive, down is negative. And so is this. This is front to back. Positive is front, negative is back. Now here's the twist. If you're using specifically 3ds Max, I don't know how it is in Blender because I frankly hate the program, but if you're going to use either program, you have to be very careful measuring out the impact coordinates. So let's say this is an animation. I know it's not an animation, but let's say it is. And you want to figure out where the impact is supposed to fall. You measure, or where the bone is. You just measure it out from relative to the root node. But the better way to do it is to simply export the unit. Here's your Sipahi. Unit exports. You hit F11. And you'll notice that in this case, the person's right thigh is somehow to the left. It's negative. In reality, this should be changed to positive. This should stay. These two should be flipped around. This is in fact the person's front to back coordinate, and this is the up to down coordinate. Okay, so these two have to be flipped around, and these two have to be changed from negative to positive or positive to negative. That one stays exactly as it is before. So let's take this particular example right here. What you do is you just go to your favorite text editor. It could be anything. Flip this around, like so. And then this stays exactly where it is. These will be the coordinates you then add to your text file, namely the skeleton. So whichever one is right thigh, you just go there, seek it out, and you should be able to just plop that right in. It should be this one, actually. Yep, it's that one. So, and you'll notice the two match up quite nicely. And you just do that for all the other entries for the skeleton. Okay? A few caveats. In the original Rome Total War, you can only have up to 24 bones in the skeleton. Do not exceed that number. It will crash the game. Rome Remastered is probably a little bit more forgiving on that. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. But for the original, it's going to be 24. With that out of the way, you then have this last entry, which is the hierarchy of the bone, the hierarchical position. Scene root is always going to be -1, assuming your file even comes with it. And bone pelvis will always be 0, okay, because that is the actual root bone. Scene root is not actually a bone, it's just a node, okay. Scene root has to always be 0, 0, 0. Bone pelvis can be anything, as your heart desires. And then you'll notice this is the first bone. It's given the position of 0, but its hierarchical rank is 1. So 0 means it's not attached to any bone, and it is the first bone in, so its order should be 1. And then it's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Some days I just don't know how to count. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Notice there are 19 bones plus scene root. Same as that, just to reiterate. And you'll notice that this attaches to this. This attaches to this. This attaches directly to the scene root. Not sure what's up with that, but it doesn't matter. This then attaches to the fourth bone, which is this one. This then attaches to the previous one. This then attaches to the one before it. And this one before that, this one before that, and so on and so forth. Okay? It's worth noting that in terms of vanilla hierarchy, all bones are in the same exact order. It doesn't matter what exactly the skeleton is. The order will differ depending on if it's a horse, an elephant, or a human, or a camel. But they all begin with the bone pelvis or an equivalent bone. So if we go to RTW Skeleton's Cracked, which is the original magnum opus, which this expands on, it will give you a list of default human bones, which is right here. This is going to be exactly the same as you see here. What this means is, if you want to add a new bone, the bone has to be here. All new bones must come below this. However, let's pretend that we have a new bone here. However, this bone can be attached to any of these other bones as you wish. You can set this so that it attaches directly to the root node, or to bone pelvis, or maybe to the previous bone. Whatever your heart desires, or maybe set this one to 19. All right, whatever you want, that is what you do. Oh, sorry about that. Indeed, even though the order of these has to remain the same and match the names, you can change these. So you can have it so that 18 attaches to 2. Bone number 19 attaches to the second bone, which is this baby right here. It should be bone abs. Or no, bone torso. My bad. So this should be this should attach to bone abs or bone torso. All right, and so on and so forth. All right, you can do that as your heart's desire. The reason I recommend not changing this, not changing the bone names, if you are editing a human skeleton specifically, is just that it makes your life easier and you're less likely to have accidents. If you're going to be super pedantic, the names don't matter all that much, and you could tell because this works just as well on horse animations or horse skeletons, and they have completely different naming schemes. The equivalent of bone pelvis, for example, is bone saddle in horses. As long as the hierarchy is correct and you're going from pelvis to the extremities, you should be okay. Alright. But for the sake of safety and always to be as conservative as possible, just use the old names and make sure they match. So, in order. So that gives you all of the skeleton information right here. This, by the way, is just a repetition of the above. You have nothing to worry about. You then have 89. This number tells you how many animation entries are in the body of the skeleton. If you add or subtract animations to this entry, you must add or subtract the same to this. If these two mismatch, you get a CTD. It crashes. You don't want that. Moving on to the body, as mentioned earlier, that's where the animations are. So it's pretty straight. It's actually the most straightforward part in many ways, but it's still got a lot of moving parts there. The most important of which is going to be the animation itself. This will be a relative directory, relative to your mod, ideally, or yeah, this one's definitely relative. So yeah, you just make sure that it reads into your mod, and you should be fine. So in this case, it's going to a folder called Schiavoni. Right? This is an unfinished skeleton, by the way. You'll notice that it has that entry. Make sure that the directory is correct and that the name is correct. You can have spaces in the name of the animation, but if you do, when you put it into this file, replace the spaces with tildes. If you do not replace it with that, the game will not read it, and you will have a very bad day. Below this is going to be what you use to edit the sounds. If you have no sounds, it's just 2 zeros. You're done. But if you do have a sound, first you're going to get a number. This number will tell you how many different sounds will play. If you have 1, 1 sound. If you have 2, 2 sounds. 3, 3 sounds. You can keep doing this ad infinitum. There's no strict limit to it. However, I find that after 3, it does bug out. So, unpredictably, it must be said. And then the number of lines under it are going to be for the actual animation sound entries. And that the number of lines will correspond exactly to the number above. So, why can't they just have it directly, the number of lines? I don't know, but whatever. It's probably a redundancy. So, yeah, for extra safety. The first number tells you what type of sound it is. This one's just a regular sound. For example, if you're, how should I say, if you have cloth moving, or if your sword is swooshing, or if a bullet's flying in the air, that's a regular sound. 2 is sound bank. I don't know what that does. I've never seen an example of it in use. 3 is what's called a vibration or shockwave sound. I suspect it has something to do with elephant motion or missiles firing, but again, I've not seen it used all that much, so I can't really confirm. 4 is what's known as, let's see the technically correct name for it. Nope, not that one. Yes, voice. And the name pretty much tells you everything you need to know, and that is if the person is screaming in pain, if he is grunting, if he is saying something. All of these fall under 4. Okay? And then finally, number 5 is the ambience. That's stuff that is passive, for lack of a better description. When a soldier farts, for example, or when his neck cracks, or his arms are stretched. That kind of thing. I don't know why this is separate from, for example, when the cloth folds or something, but it just is. Right? So, the next thing is going to be zeros, a bunch of zeros, 3 of them. They're mostly for space. They're really three spaces or 3 tabs, something like that. You then have 2 in this example. This is going to be the soonest frame in which the sound will play. 6 is the latest frame in which it can play. Again, there are zeros for space. There are plenty of those. You then have the entry for the sound as it exists in your description sound anim file. Alright, so this is going to be, not this one. If you go to data, description sound anim file is, or unit anim, something like that. There you go. That's going to be where you find it, for example. And you'll notice that crack is not on here. Right? We'll get to in a moment why. But in this particular case, because it's number 1, this should be here. There you go. If it is a ambient, so it's number 5, it's going to have a separate entry. Description sounds units ambient. There's also going to be description sounds unit shockwave, theoretically. Description sounds unit sound bank, theoretically. And description sounds units voice, which is hardly theoretical. So, albeit it has a slightly different name. Yep, there it is. All right. So there are separate entries, ideally, for each one. And then there's description sound unit anim, which is just number 1. So the regular animation. Okay? After that, you have some space here, and then you have these numbers. Knight Errant said that the function of these is unknown, but in reality it's actually a simple Boolean. It tells you whether this plays randomly or not. So if it's 1, what the game will do is it'll pick a value between 2 and 6, including them, and play it at that point. If, however, it is 0, it will only play strictly at a specific time, usually this first one right here. Okay? And indeed, in most animation cases, those two are the same when this is 0. And that covers the sound aspect of the animation, you know, how the two are linked together. And it's, from what I understand, it's a little bit different in Rome Remastered, but that's how it works in original. You then go on to the fun parts, which cover the kinematics of the unit and the impact coordinates and all that fun jazz. All right? The first 2 numbers, we'll talk about these in a moment. The first 2 numbers are representative of rotation. Specifically, this doesn't really matter, but this does. And the way it works is, imagine you have a circle, and 1 is 0 degree, and the square root of 256 minus 1 is 359.9. Alright? And imagine you're going clockwise as you do so. Right? So half of 256 minus 1, give or take, is going to be 180 degrees. 3/4 of that is going to be 270 degrees. And the way what it tells the game is, we want the unit to face in that particular direction. Alright, so in this case, it's roughly 90 degrees. Remember, 0 to 360, so 90 degrees is going to be 90 degrees to your right. And indeed, that's what it says here. Okay. But what happens if you set it to 3/4? Well, the game instructs the model to turn in the shortest manner possible, the most economic manner possible, which is where the left hand comes in, and the animation will help with that. Alright, so it lets the unit know that yes, he's supposed to face to the left when all is said and done. Hence left. This will generally be for cases where the unit is turning right or left, when the unit is, sometimes when the unit it changes pace or starts marching or it advances in a melee. This could be for any number of reasons. For example, if you want to simulate that a phalanx is drifting to the right over time, what you can have it do is, whenever you set it on, whenever they're in melee, the unit will be on guard on the ready mode, and when he advances in the ready, you can have him rotate 10 degrees to the right, forcing everybody to drift to the right, or to the left, something like that. Whichever way makes it spin the right direction. I can't math, don't worry about it. I have to actually sit and think about it. So, that gives you the rotation aspect. It's worth noting that this isn't the only way rotation is rendered in this very file, which makes me wonder what Creative Assembly was thinking, but that's okay. This next entry are the impact coordinates of the attack. For most units, it's going to be set to 0. In vanilla files, this is typically the last entry, the front-back one, is going to be set to 1.6. That is a bug, but it doesn't really do anything because there's no attack. And the reason there's no attack is because there's no impact frame. Alright? So we have no need to worry about this. And in fact, in the modded version of the Skeleton Importer Exporter, Vartan and I were able to fix this bug, so it should export 0 if there's no front-back impact. Okay? And it works exactly as in the skeleton file above. Alright? So this will be your left-right coordinate, this will be your up-down coordinate, this will be your front-back coordinate. Okay? And positive is going to be right, negative is going to be left, positive is up, negative is down, and once again front is positive, back is negative. The next number after that is going to be the impact frame as discussed before. That is going to be the frame where the unit's action will impact the opposing unit. This one's a little tricky because the coordinate here is going to be the coordinate of the weapon when it hits the soldier. Okay, but if you set this particular frame so that it matches when this sword actually hits the target, you're going to have a result where the person hits the target with the sword and he's going to die before the sword even reaches him, assuming that the blow is fatal. Alright? And the reason for that is because the game actually calculates the outcome before the blow lands. Alright? So what you want to do is, whichever frame that the blow falls on is going to be this frame minus 1. So if the sword is in the correct position on frame 8, your impact frame is going to be frame 7. You can go as far as 0.6 depending on the nature of the weapon, but typically it's 1 frame behind where this is. So, and the way you measure this, you can't really do it the way you measure the skeleton, which is to say you press F11 and call it a day. That won't work. What you have to do instead is you measure out from the scene root and you find where the impact point of the weapon is, and the result should be something that looks like this, a big cube or cuboid, if you will. The left-right coordinates in this case are 919, 92 centimeters. That's the widest part of this particular object. The height is about half a meter. Ideally, you want to put in the exact numbers that you see here. So just copy and paste. And then add a 0 because everything's to 4 digits. So it's about half a meter up and down. And from front to back, it is 675. And notice that the measurement is always from the scene root. It doesn't matter what the pose is. It is always from scene root to point of impact. And let's say that this impact happened on frame 30. All right, so you set the impact frame. So when it actually reaches that position, it's on 30. You set the impact frame to 29. And it's going to be the most realistic look you can get. Moving past that, you have this number, which makes a lot more sense if I can find... Yeah, any of these will do. Alright, so there's your impact frame number. These are your impact coordinates as discussed. You then have these two numbers that are in between the two. Don't worry about them. The exporter will the converter will generate it automatically for you. But they're essentially polar coordinate versions of these. So this gives you the direction, and that gives you the magnitude. So it's a vector, essentially. A vector form of this. And this is always positive. This, however, can be negative. And the way it works is it goes from 0, or more accurately 1, to either positive or negative the square of 256 divided by 2. Right? So it's like 30-something thousand. Alright? There's your impact frame number once again. This 0 is there for space. And this represents the forward-backward displacement of the unit during the attack. So if you measure the, especially in a charge attack, if you measure the attack coordinates only and leave this at 0, and what the game will do is it's only going to consider the blow as it exists from the scene root at time 1. It's going to be 1, not 0. And as a result, imagine if the person is running 5 meters before he delivers he's supposed to deliver his blow. If you don't include 5 meters in the relevant spot, let's say this is 5 meters, if you don't include it here, what'll end up happening is his blow will fall 5 meters in front of his opponent. Meaning either it won't do anything or it's going to magically kill the person from a distance of 5 meters. Alright? So what you do is, if the person has a charge animation, or if the person's movement generally, or if the person's attack generally involves a lot of movement, or significant movement, you add a figure here. Okay? For cavalry, this will always be set to 0, because they're not going to move independently. It's the mount that's moving. After that, you have 2 different values right here. These work essentially the same as this particular value. They're rotations. Okay? And in this particular case, because of the way it's been coded, this will tell you that the unit will use this animation whenever it is within a cone from 0 to 80 or 90 degrees, something like that. Alright? And this becomes very important when you do turn animations. You'll notice that units can wheel in Rome Total War. The ability to wheel is in large part because of these 2 numbers, near as I can tell. Alright? So it lets them wheel in increments of 10 degrees. Alright? Similarly, it allows it to wheel all the way to 90 degrees. Then you have the next 3 values. These are launching animations. They don't really seem to do anything per se, near as I can tell, so I recommend not touching that. You're more than welcome to experiment if you want, but just be aware of the risks. And really, all animations work in exactly the same way. If an animation involves rotation along, and it's always going to be along bone pelvis, you must add the rotation here. This is why a lot of people attempting to redesign death animations, for example, ended up having it bug out so that the dead body is a meter or 2 away from where it's supposed to be, for example. It's going to be because they could not edit this particular value properly, nor could they edit this value where applicable, you know, if he moves a lot. Okay? Now, let's say you want to add or remove an animation. What you do is pretty straightforward. Let's say I don't want this animation. I don't like the sight of it. I want it out of my sight. What you do is you just delete this all the way until you're 1 tab away from this Boolean factor. Add a 0. Okay? And you add as many zeros as you do animations that you have deleted. Okay? And you change the number of animations at the top here. Again, if you don't, you will crash the game. Now, if you want to add in a specific animation, do so very carefully and resort to the order that is provided, if I can find it, in this GitHub. Or is it this GitHub? Anyway, there's going to be a set list of animations that you have to go through, is the point. You cannot put the idle animation at the end, for example. Okay? This animation cannot go at the end. The attack animation cannot go at the beginning. Death animations cannot go anywhere but where the death animations belong, which is why you have to have these zeros every time you delete an animation. Otherwise, the game will not be able to read it properly, and you will almost certainly crash the game. Right. Oh. So, with that out of the way, we get to the body of the animation. Or the tail of the animation, sorry. Once you've done all that you need to do with the body, this is the last step. Let's say you've made a new walking animation. This tells the unit, or this tells the game more accurately, to tell the unit how many steps it needs to march before it reaches a particular destination. So if you have an animation that is walking at 89 centimeters a second, okay, you need to change the walking from this, which by the way is quite unrealistic in terms of what is possible, to this, 89 centimeters a second. This is a velocity, it is not stride length. Your stride length is invariably going to be equal to or less than this. Okay, unless you're doing something really weird with your animations. So, walking animation anyway. So that's going to be what goes there. This is your running animation. And this is your charge animation. For horses, this will be your walk or trot animation, at least in vanilla. This is going to be your canter to slow gallop, and this is going to be your charging gallop. Finally, you have these two numbers. The first number tells you that this skeleton can use missiles. Right? Technically, this shouldn't. This should be set to 0 because this is a swordsman animation. But if you put it as 1, it shouldn't hurt it. It'll only be a problem if it's a missile animation, or if it's a missile skeleton. This one tells you if the unit can rotate or otherwise move on its own. All right. For horses, infantry, elephants, and camels, the answer is always 1. If you're a horseman, however, the answer is 0. Therefore, if you're a melee horseman, this will be 0 and 0. Horse archers will be 1 and 0, and infantry will be 1 and 1. The horse itself will be 1 and 1, and so will the elephant, and so on and so forth. Okay, it's worth noting that with cavalry, these 3 values are always set to 0. It's the horse that carries the speed, not the man, which makes sense. I mean, who's the one doing the galloping? And with that, we have the basic anatomy of the skeleton out of the way. And all you have to do is you make your animation, you put it in the right folder within the animation folder, and you make sure that these entries are set to point to the animations that you want. You can name it whatever you want. I tend to be relatively conservative in my naming conventions, but most people can be as adventurous as they wish, just as they please. I would recommend having each animation, or more accurately each skeleton, have its own animation folder rather than having them share the same folder. That way you don't accidentally overwrite things. Also, it's just an eyesore, at least in my opinion. So keep that in mind. So you've edited your animation, you've done your job, you're very happy with what you got, and you think this is going to work just fine. So what you do is, we don't have to save this, it's already there. What you do is you go back to animation, you have your skeleton converter, just open it again, text to skeleton, you find the animation that you want to modify, or you want to implement, click it, here's your text file, open, there you go, you got your conversion. 7 Years War Skeleton. And what you do, and you'll notice it has a modified, so unlike converting from skeleton to text, text to skeleton will not overwrite your old skeleton. Alright. Having said that, I do recommend that you keep a backup of your original skeleton in case things go belly up. At that point, if you want to integrate it, you remove the original, or you copy it away, whatever you want. Just keep a backup. And you rename this, you remove the modified part, renaming this to just 7 Years War Skeleton. And then what you do is, you go to your list, and you add 7 Years Skeleton to that. And similarly, all the animations you've made, you add to the animation list, and it should follow pretty much the same format as the other ones that were modded in. So if you go to 7 Years War, of course, come on, there we go. Yeah, so these are the ones that I added in. And you'll notice that it's relative to the data folder of your mod. So you don't have to put, in this example, 7 Years War /data /data /animation. It's going to be just data, animation, 7 Years' War of British Musketeer. Okay. So you put everything in for the animation list and the list. And then all you have to do is go to your pack animation, pack skeleton. Generally, I prefer to start with the animation. So you just pack your animation. It takes time, depending on how many animations you have and their size. And I have unusually large animations because I work a lot on muskets. There you go. And then you just pack the skeleton once that's done. As to the number of possible skeletons and animations, there's no limit beyond that imposed by how many units you can actually have in the game. So in the case of Rome Total War Alexander, it's going to be 512 unit models maximum, if I recall correctly. So that is so it's that times 2 if you assume each unit gets 2 animations exactly. If you account for officers and the like, it's probably a little bit higher. So you can make pretty much as many animations as you please and as many skeletons as you please, and which the game can handle. And you can make some pretty detailed animations to go with the skeletons. And you can make skeletons to any scale and size, as long as, at least for original, you don't go over 24 bones. And with that, we have the basics of skeleton animation in Rome Total War.